Welcome back, Woo Crew, to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I'm here today as one of your co-hosts, Ellie, and I'm here with,
Eileen.
and today we're going to talk about sacred rage.
Hmm.
I feel like fists are in the air already when we say this. Sacred rage.
Yeah.
But first, before we talk about the content for today's episode, we want to invite you to what's happening in our Patreon. Eileen, will you tell us about that?
Yeah. Our next event, our next live event inside of the Patreon will be our Witches Corner, which is a live come ask us all of your questions. Like it's a Q&A, it's a circle, it's a space to connect. It's it's the heart of the coven, if you will. And that is happening on Monday, the 19th. So if you want to hop into the Patreon before then, we'd love to have you really getting excited about how this space is fleshing out, the little extras that we're adding in. We're always brainstorming different ways to make that a really special space for you. And it's 11.11 a month, which is, how can you say no? So the link, as always, will be in the show note. Invite your friends. Come join us.
Yeah, come join us. Come join us for these events. We are having so much fun creating them and just getting to interact with all of you. So this is great.
Mhm. And as usual, we'll start off with our magical moments. So, Ellie, what magical moment did you want to share about the week that you just had or something that's happened to you recently?
Yeah, really, I'm still like riding high on the being out in nature. It's just soothing my soul right now. But I had a moment this week in the 13 Moon Mystery School that I'm a part of, where, as part of our curriculum, we have temples that we attend. And the temple was a really deep experience on the archetype of the Great Mother. And I had this realization around receiving love. And giving love is one thing. I feel like it's for a lot of us, it's really easy to give out love and to really be present and caring for somebody when they really need help and that extra attention. And it's hard to reach out for that care and attention. And it's hard to reach out if you need to receive love. And so the magical moment for me was just this incredibly deep experience of receiving love from all around me and how I receive love and how I block receiving love. And it's been such an amazing experience to come out of that temple, come out of that frequency, and to apply it to really my everyday life of, oh, here's where I'm blocking it. Here's where, today I just received some a payment from my mama of something that I paid for. And my initial reaction was like, oh, I just need to send this back to her. I just
Mm.
like I've got it. I don't need this. And how in love and devotion, this is something that she wants to make sure that she shows me her love with. And so I took another moment and was like, great, I'm ready to receive this. Thank you so much.
Mm.
The receptivity is definitely a different frequency than giving love in the world right now.
I love this offering of magic because it is such a place of struggle for so many women. It feels deeply uncomfortable to receive. And it comes back to that good girl conditioning. Like you give, you take care of everybody else, you make sure everybody else is okay, and you're fine. You can do it yourself. That hyper individualism comes in, right? That piece of our hyper independence that is so toxic, but is so pervasive. So that's a beautiful moment. And I'm so delighted to hear that you were able to pause and receive. It starts so consciously, right? We have to practice the receiving really consciously, like any change of any kind of habit.
Mhm.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. What
Yeah.
about you? Tell me about any magical moments that have happened to you lately.
Yeah. Mine, it's just kind of a bit of a funny realization or story. We've been trying to meet up with new people here, and it just happens that Greg has a bunch of people who work for the same, he's contracted to ATP right now, and a bunch of people who work for ATP either live in Buenos Aires or they were visiting here. I know it's wild. And we keep randomly being like, oh, and this person works there. Anyway, so we'd met up with one gal the day before she left to go home, unfortunately, but she kind of made a connection between somebody else who was staying at her place. There's something called the Wi-Fi tribe, and it's like co-housing situations for people who are working abroad.
Cool.
And yeah, it is cool. So you kind of have like built-in friends wherever you land, although she said it was terrible for actually getting work done, which makes sense. But we met up with some of them on Sunday evening, and the one gal I had met, the other two, they were guys, they were like probably, I don't know, 25, 26, if I had to guess, software developers. Like these were were nerdy dudes. And they were asking me what I did, and I told them, and I didn't gloss over the healing piece. Often when I'm explaining to people what I do, I really lean towards explaining the coaching because life coaching feels legitimate. And it's like this thing that is like, I have a certificate for, I mean, I have a certificate for both, but it
Yeah, it's
feels
tangible.
more, yeah, it's tangible. And to me, and part of this is the story I'm telling myself, but it feels like it's backed by science. Whereas energy healing, although there is science to back it up, there are studies being done, especially around Reiki, which is similar to what I do, and even distance Reiki, showing that it's effective, but it's a lot less commonly known, I think. And it just feels a bit like I remember myself feeling like this is crazy. And so when I go to explain it to people, my kind of internal dialogue is still, you sound like a crazy person. But I decided not to care. I'm probably never going to see these guys again. And I told them about how I do my distance healings. And they asked, they're like, how do you do that from here? And I was like, it doesn't even have to be on Zoom. Quite frankly, I really enjoy doing these healings while my clients go about their day, while they're doing their thing. I drop in and do my thing in their energy. And then I send them over a voice note. And I'm sure that they probably thought I was a little crazy. At least the two guys did. But I walked away being like, I don't care, actually. So that was, yeah, that little magical moment of remembering that as we step into new identities or explore new things, modalities, whatever it is, it's never going to be comfortable at first. And I think this is relevant to the whole topic of this podcast because many of our listeners are woo curious, right? They're like, well, this is kind of interesting, but I'm not sure that I'm about to go calling myself a witch just yet. Or they're witch adjacent. But it takes practice and practice in safe circles and safe places and spaces. And I think that's part of the power of what you and I have created also in our group containers, in our community containers with the Patreon and individually, you with Wild Woman and then me with Unleash Your Inner Witch, is these safe spaces to start to practice speaking about this, start to practice trying on these identities.
That's exactly
Yeah.
what we do. We pull robes from the broom closet and we say, does this fit? Does this fit? Does this fit? I even went to a lovely store this last week that is a witch store. Can we call this a witch store? A really lovely store. Raven's Claw, I think is what the name of it was here in Vancouver.
Well, that
Ravens.
sounds like a witch store.
Yeah. And I had a moment because, sometimes the witch aesthetic is really popular. And
Mhm.
I love myself some witch aesthetic things. And I think that that store really provides people an opportunity to try on different things because it had different divination tools that you can use in your practice because it's not all the same. It's not all one size
Mhm.
fits all.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was great. It was like walking in, it was literally like walking into the broom closet. I loved it.
Oh, yeah, it's like that little shop that I walked into here the week before that was just like herbs hanging from the ceiling and brooms on the walls and potions and crystal. It was, oh my God, it was great. It's like the witch in the forest hut is what it felt like walking into.
You found home.
Yeah, I was like, I need to learn more Spanish so I can go hang out with these women.
Totally, totally.
Soy es una bruja or something. Yo soy. I don't know which one means I am.
I think both. If the grammar
Yeah, but
police
there's
come
a
for us,
nuance
though,
there.
there is a new.
There's a
What is
nuance
casual?
there.
What is
Well,
casual?
yeah. Yeah, no, something to do with the grammar. One of them is correct and one of them is not when referring to something permanent that I am. I think there's one that would be like relevant if you were feeling sick. If you were sick, you wouldn't be like, you
It's
aren't
temporary.
here. It's temporary. So I don't know which is which. Anyways, so we're working on it.
Working on it. Yeah, work in progress. Spanish speaking every day.
Yeah.
Shall we dive into our content for today's episode?
Yes, let's do that.
Let's look at the kind of the big picture of what we're going to talk about today. I want to kind of give us this overarching view so that we know what the path is that we're taking in this episode. So we have a history, really this history of not being able to express ourselves. When we talk about sacred rage, this is a moment in time where this is like a coming home moment that's happening right now for us. And so historically, it's not been safe. It's not been okay for us to express our rage. And then why it's necessary. This is something that we definitely are in the moment of right now is that instead of suppressing our rage and all of our emotions for that matter, or some of our emotions, we repress all of them, as Brene Brown has taught us over the years. Then we want to look
Mhm.
at the archetypes of sacred rage, like where in history have we seen this and why it reminds us, it links us back to this being okay and ways to express our sacred rage. Shall we dive
Mhm.
in?
We shall, yes. Yeah, I'm excited about this one.
So let's have a general talk about why it hasn't been safe for women to express their rage and anger for many years. We have things like, let's call them archetype, let's call them the good girl frequency, if you will. This wanting to always please, to always be good, to always be ladylike. And anybody who does express themselves in any sort of emotion that is not in the frequency of goodness, if you will, is not in the joy or above. Lots of times women have been labeled things like hysterical, or how many times have women been labeled bitchy or a bitch because they have expressed an emotion other than this people-pleasing emotion. We also have the terms and the name calling of bossy. I remember one time a partner of mine called me bossy, and I said to them, "Am I really bossy, or is this just a moment where you're upset with me?" Because if I'm
Am I
really
just asserting
bossy,
my needs?
yeah, if I'm really bossy, I'm going to accept that right now because I'm fine with that title. And then
Mhm.
this whole term, and I'm, in air quotes of crazy. And this is definitely a term that has been really popular in the past, even in my vocabulary. And it's something that I'm consciously removing from my vocabulary to not describe women as crazy because
Mhm.
they're not crazy. They're mad. They're angry.
Mhm.
They're
Yeah.
pissed.
Well, I think it's really important to point out too that some of I mean, that obviously the double standards that exist with these states of being between men and women, you know, bossy is assertive if you're a man, and bitchy is like rightfully upset if you're
Hmm.
a man. And the word hysterical too, the root of that word, hysteria, that means uterus. Like a hysterectomy is the removal of a uterus. It's coming back to that Latin. It's something that only a woman can be because only a woman has a uterus. Doctors used to try to cure women of hysteria by giving them orgasms. They had a machine for it. Like this is
The
all
first
tied in.
the first vibrators that were invented were to relieve
Yeah.
women of their sexual frustration because let's be real.
Yeah, let's be real. My practice partner actually found one in an antique store or like a thrift store.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
cool.
I
Back when I
went
was still practicing.
I went to the Taboo Sex Show last week and it there was definitely a few things that looked similar, updated versions of.
Right. It's not
We're still using
complicated.
them.
Yeah. But yeah, it is this sense of not only being labeled, but also being dismissed. It's that showing of strong emotion making you less rational, right? Crazy and hysterical, both of those words imply something of a non-rational nature. Like women who have strong emotions are emotional, not rational. And it's like in our culture, we've been told, and most people believe that you can't be both. You have to be calm, cool, and collected. Again, unless you're a man. Not always. Sometimes they get told they're being irrational too. Obviously, sometimes men can be called irrational because they've flown off the handle, but it is definitely more likely to be applied to an angry woman or for a woman to be viewed as unpleasant or unlikable or rude. But yeah, that piece, it really it's not been safe for us, right? So not only do we get dismissed, but historically we have women expressing themselves calls attention, and attention as a woman has often in history not been a safe thing.
Right, totally. So this comes down to really patriarchal brainwashing. Like this is part of the brainwashing that we have lived with that says that anything that is other than the archetype of the quiet woman or the obedient woman or the nice woman, she's so nice. She's so nice. And
Mm-hmm.
that that points towards, someone who does not express a full range of emotion. And it's not that we have to be out here like, raging, although I definitely encourage it. We don't have to be out here raging. It's just a matter of being able to express those things and feeling safe. And I want to come back to this whole safe part. You know, as part of the patriarchy, the reason that it hasn't been safe for women to express their rage or anger about things is a double-edged sword. It's both the labeling that comes with somebody who is upset and angry. So we're coming back to, crazy, hysterical, for that matter, the wild woman, bitchy, bossy, all of that side of things. And then the other side of the coin is that when we're expressing our anger, not everyone knows how to hold that frequency. And so it
Mm-hmm.
becomes uncomfortable for them, the witness, to hold your anger because they don't have that capacity. And it's part of capacity building. If we don't have it, it's literally like a muscle that we get to flex and build, but we are not taught how to. And we're taught to soothe as children. When there's anger in the room, your child is angry, the first thing you do is soothe their anger. And that soothing discharges for the most part, but also creates a cycle of, okay, so I need to be soothed after I'm angry, or I don't complete the loop. And one of the things that I think the book Burnout is just like the most miraculous book
So
for
good.
women
So
of
good.
this era. But it talks about completing the loop. And when we don't complete the loop, it stays open. And that openness, we just pile on. And so we have these moments of continuing to pile on incidents that induce the sacred rage. And therefore we blow our top. We blow our top because we're not taught how to express it in a meaningful and I'm saying productive, but what I really mean is like emotionally regenerative way.
Well, yeah, which is productive. And a lot of women never blow their top. And that
Exactly.
leads to all sorts of repercussions. Women especially are super prone to autoimmune diseases. Things like ALS, if anybody has read The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, I'm sure we've talked about him on here before too. He talks about how women have much higher rates of things like MS and ALS and all of these autoimmune issues, even some cancers, eczemas, things like that, like all those autoimmune things. And they found a really direct, very robust link between the expression of emotions and especially anger and the incidence of having one of these autoimmune issues flare up to the point that nurses in ALS wards are able to accurately predict when people are not nice enough to have the disease. They can't always tell if somebody's going to have it because lots of people are nice and don't get ALS, but they have like 100% accuracy rate if somebody's like mean and nasty and showing any kind of socially unacceptable behavior, they definitely do not have ALS.
So interesting.
It's wild.
Wow. And I think from a TCM perspective, things like skin issues like eczema and stuff, it's heat in the body that is trying to come out. Or it's part of it is dampness. It's like we're trying to dampen things down. And so it will come out even if you are just stuffing that down as far as we can go to make sure that
Mhm.
the top never gets blown.
Comes out somehow.
It
Yeah.
comes out
It,
somehow.
it always comes out somehow. That's the midwife's motto, better out than in. It applies to so much of life.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I want to tell a story about not being able to express anger in a relationship that I had a 13-year relationship, just a little blip in time, really. Uh,
Mm.
the the interesting part about this relationship and the moment in time in my life was just how I was angry. I was very angry. I was angry because I was not able to fully express all of my emotions because anything other than joy or lower in frequency than joy was a trigger for my partner at the time because of their upbringing. And, you know, we are conditioned as children, especially, to understand how we can express our anger or if it's safe to express our anger. And it wasn't safe in that relationship for me to express my anger. And the part of me turned on myself. Intuitively, I was like, this is okay. This is a moment in time. We're going to express ourselves in this capacity and then we're going to go back down. We need to blow this steam off. Okay. And coming back to the place of regulation after that would mean for me that I was just in this shame spiral and that it
Mm.
was somehow my fault that I was angry. And I was angry and that was scaring my partner at the time. That anger was scaring them. And so I went to therapy and I said, I need to fix this. I need to fix this whole like angry part of me. And we talked through the situations where I'm angry. And literally she said to me, there's no problem here. Like there's not a rage problem. There's a problem with being able to safely express this. And this was definitely a moment in time for me where I was like, we need to pause. We need to pause on all of this because just because my partner didn't have the capacity to hold it didn't mean that there was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And how many women think that there's something wrong with them, or individuals think that there's something wrong with them because they're not able to safely express their anger?
Mhm. I was saying before we hopped on, I also had a tiny blip of a 10-year relationship. And it was like, again, the sense of not being able to really express any negative emotions, but specifically within this relationship, it was as small as a disagreement. Like if I disagreed with my partner, to him and his upbringing and his family, that was saying, I think you're stupid and you're wrong. Right. And so it was
Mhm.
also the same kind of like this feeling of like not being able to self-express at all. Every time I let my guard down in any way in that relationship, I ended up causing damage, as it were. And anytime I felt like, oh, I can just be myself, I can say what I want, walking on eggshells and just feeling that mood in the home. And again, it was not his fault per se. It was his upbringing where disagreements and anger were just not something that you expressed ever, 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 ever. And he hadn't done any work around it. So it definitely ended up causing for me, I mean, I think I've told this story before, but in that relationship, that was a big piece of it. There was the desire to leave that I felt like I couldn't leave for a long time. And there was this smushing down of my emotions and my needs and my desires that led to literal heartburn that I was medicated for. And
Mhm.
it was a wild example of like my body was like, okay, well, if you're gonna stay, like this shit's gotta get out. So we talk about rage, like oh, I was on fire from the inside. at my situation, at my inability to leave, at my inability to really express any of my emotions to their fullness. I didn't know it was that at the time, but again, these relationships with hindsight give us so much powerful learning.
Perspective is everything.
Hmm.
And you're making
Hmm.
me realize one of the key points for me was this inability to express things other than what is acceptable to express, or
Hmm.
to like things other than what is acceptable to like liking the
Hmm.
same food, or I like this, why don't you like this? It can be as small and as innocuous as that. That was one of the big things, if we didn't like the same things, that was
Hmm.
something which then also kept me in this moment, like you, of I can't express myself fully because if I like something other than what they like, it really becomes, coming back to the word innocuous, there's so many small innocuous things that are flags that we, until we have the perspective, don't understand.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And anger for so many women, just bringing us kind of back to the main emotion we're talking about today, although they're all, as you said, they're so intertwined. If you can't express one emotion fully, then you can't feel and express any others fully
Mm-hmm.
either. Like they all get dampened down when you dampen them down.
Mm-hmm.
And holding large emotions and allowing for them to be felt and validating them is a skill most of us aren't taught, like you said about, soothing little children. Yes, of course, we want to be present for them and available for them, but rather than immediately kicking into, I got to fix this for you and get you past this emotion, because mustn't it suck to feel this way? Holding it and validating it and asking about why they're feeling it is a skill that I'm seeing more and more of now. And I'm so excited to see what happens with the generation of children that are being raised, because our generation certainly did not have that. And it's really obvious in our relationships when we have those big emotions. Like I think about anytime I'm big sad or big mad, my partner now goes into automatic like calm down mode. And he does it with love, but it just makes it worse. It makes me more mad or more sad because then I don't feel seen or validated in my anger. The story that was jumping to mind was a friend of mine had called with a really scary revelation that she was suicidal. And I called her parents. They seemed pretty blasé about the whole thing. And I was livid. I was so angry at her parents. I was like, why are you not like turning the car around, coming back to the city right now to help? And I was expressing my anger to my partner as I got ready to go out and go to her. And he was just like trying to tell me all the rational reasons why I shouldn't be as mad as I was. Like it wasn't me to control how they behaved, like all of these things. And I was just like, I just need you to hear me. Like I'm terrified right now. I'm super sad and upset. And I'm pissed. And I'm allowed to be all of these things.
Mm,
And often in the moment, it's hard to ask or say why it hurts so much, but the shutdown, like it made it worse. It made everything I was feeling was compounded because I suddenly felt like I was feeling it alone.
mm,
And it's almost like gaslighting. Not again, not intentionally, but it's like this when we're told we shouldn't feel these strong emotions, they're too big, it makes us feel crazy.
mm. Yeah, here we come back to this whole crazy making. It literally is like, this is the definition of crazy making, is that seeing something clearly and not being heard with what you saw is
Mhm.
is part of this perpetual crazy making. And again, this is patriarchal brainwashing, that we've separated ourselves from our intuition. We've separated ourselves from our knowing. And we've then been questioned. And it's fine to question things. I'm not saying don't question things, but I am saying that with conviction, if somebody is saying something, then you get to make the decision to either, you know, be with them in that moment, be with them
Mhm.
fully in that experience,
Mhm.
or to turn away. And a lot of times what's happening is not just turning away, is closing our eyes but thinking
Yeah.
we're still staying present in the face of whatever is happening.
Yeah. And that's part of where that feeling of not being safe to express gets reinforced. You know, it
Yeah.
used to be that it quite legitimately, life-threateningly could not be safe to express. And now it's not that, but that isolation feeling or that crazy feeling. You know, we know that humans die from loneliness. We certainly can. We know it's a pandemic right now. The pandemic is not is not the C word, it's the loneliness epidemic, they're calling it. I think that's just silly. They're on the same scale. And and so it is this is what makes it feel unsafe to express our anger, is that isolation,
Mhm.
real or just in the moment. Regardless, it does feel super unsafe from a biological, like, you know, that's your old monkey brain who is like, this isn't safe, we can't do this. Like, being shunned from the group is not okay, and we'll contort ourselves and do anything it takes to feel accepted. So that's part of the importance. Oh, this is a great segue. The importance of why holding space is necessary and feeling our sacred rage is necessary and useful.
Yeah, it is. And to piggyback on what you're saying here is that this is part of our healthy emotional response.
Hmm.
This is part of our, like, what makes rage different from sacred rage? Sacred rage really is just the consciousness around feeling the rage. It's not that we have to, we can't lash out, but understanding what we're lashing out against. And it's not that we can't express those things, but understanding how we're expressing them. And this isn't a moment in time for us to make sure that it's in a pretty little package, because that's not what we're saying here. It's literally the difference between being conscious or unconscious about this.
Hmm.
So our emotional expressions, our full range of emotions, allows us to create boundaries.
Hmm.
And it's okay to create boundaries. I always come back to the only person who does not like you having boundaries are the people that benefited from you not having boundaries. And in the face of setting boundaries over, especially these last 3 years, it has been a really curious experiment for myself to go, oh, instead of unraveling the boundary immediately as soon as it was made, and instead of crumbling in the face of adversity, standing in that moment of, okay, I understand that you don't like this because you don't benefit from this. You don't
Hmm.
benefit from this.
And often, or even I would say always, the people who struggle with your boundaries the most because they're not benefiting from it, because they're used to benefiting from it, are also the ones who have really shitty boundaries themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're resentful of your boundaries, right? They're resentful because they feel like, well, I do things for you all the time, and now you're just going to not do them for me. And so it kind of, it's just highlighting, it highlights
Mm-hmm.
what they're missing there. And anger specifically is very powerful for helping us find and set boundaries. But like, anger keeps us safe. If you think about the flare of that emotion, it comes along with a rush of adrenaline. You know, it was a response, a biological response to a threat. And so whatever that threat is, whether it's psychological, whether it's physical, it's a really powerful tool to point to, like, hey, we need a boundary, or we need to do something different or take an action that shifts our situation so that we stay safe. And when we push that down, when we tell our bodies that, you know, we're being crazy, that there's no need to feel this really powerful basic biological emotion, we're disconnecting ourselves like immediately and deeply from our intuition. As you mentioned earlier, it is that like severing almost, because those really powerful emotions are the most direct connection we have to our intuition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, from a divine feminine perspective, what expressing our anger and our sacred rage does is start to dismantle these systems, these patriarchal beliefs that we are here to please. As women, we're here to be quiet. We're here to be joyful. We're here to be with a smile on our face. You know, the immediate just it was brought back to my 20s where, it was really common. I'm sure it is now. I'm just not in these situations still. It was really common for a dude to come up to you at a bar and say, "Why aren't you smiling?"
Ugh.
And the immediate wrath that I would unleash. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that I was here to please you. So yeah, from a divine feminine perspective, we have this dismantling and this destroying of these systems that are no longer serving us. It does not serve us to not be able to express ourselves in a full range and capacity.
Mhm.
It also doesn't serve us to feel like we are out of control. And
Mhm.
oftentimes we feel like we are out of control because we have, dampened that rage emotion. We've dampened those lower frequencies. Well, they're not even lower frequencies, actually. They have a frequency. They're a different frequency. We're not even able to express those. And that starts to create, as we've just heard, illness and dis-ease in our bodies.
Mhm. It doesn't serve us and it doesn't serve anyone around us either because it allows harmful cycles to perpetuate. And again, that modeling of behavior to each other, we think about our children, but also our friends. You know, if somebody's doing something wounding and you keep your anger inside, they're going to keep doing that behavior.
Mhm.
If nobody
Mhm.
tells them that it's hurtful, obviously in a situation that perhaps they're not aware of the harm or the hurt they're causing, it'll undermine your own relationship with them potentially, but also their ability to form relationships with other people. So we start to bring it around to like, okay, how does sacred rage serve you, but also how does it serve others?
Do you have anything to say about this death, life cycles?
Oh, just this piece of, we've been talking about the wild woman because we've been reading Women Who Run with Wolves. And for our book club inside Patreon, we were reading it in January. We're covering it in February as well. If you're wanting to jump in for February, we will have a second live on that for the book club at the end of the month. But she talks about in that book frequently this life, death, life cycle, right? We need the storms and the death cycle in order to have new life. And again, it comes back into this. We need the anger so we can feel the joy. We need to be able to express all of the emotions and have all of the experiences because life is not just one-sided, right? We're not
Mm,
spiritual bypassing here. We don't
mm-mm,
get to live in joy all the time. We can
mm-mm.
bring ourselves back to joy, but we don't get to live there all the time because we won't feel it if we can't feel the other side of it.
This is a great segue for us to talk about the archetypes of sacred rage as well. In this moment,
Mhm.
especially as we mentioned reading Women Who Run with the Wolves, it is a whole book on the archetype of the wild woman and the archetype of the woman who wants to be set free from the really patriarchal brainwashing is what we come back to. It all is patriarchal, FTP all over the place. So we have these archetypes that we can really see where rage and sacred rage is expressed in, I want to use the word healthy, but I want to also use this that is just expressed period because there's not this healthiness. We're not pointing towards like this is good and this is bad. This is not what this conversation is about today. So the first one that we want to talk about is the archetype of Kali. Oh, Kali, the destroyer. And she's the destroyer of all things that stand in our way of seeing clearly. And often this is the ego. And so we have the story, she's destroying the stories that we're telling ourselves. She's destroying the systems that are in place. We're breaking down those systems that we just talked about here. We're making we're creating opportunities for ourselves to really see clearly through all of this. Because if we think of rage like fire, it's transformative. We start to
Mm.
transmute that energy from this red hotness into something that is, is either a coal that burns more evenly or that completely burns out. And the product that was burning itself, the wood, is now forever changed. And so
Forever.
as we look towards Kali for this inspiration of how to express our rage in a very sacred way, it's not suppression. It's not dampening. It's not, oh, I'll just let a little bit out. It's fury. It's
Hmm.
wild abandonment. And
Hmm.
it's necessary for things to transmute and to transform.
Hmm. And I think that this also it brings us to that piece of, how it feels uncomfortable because, as you mentioned before, it feels like you can get swept away by it.
Mhm.
And this is something that we've spoken to when we've discussed grief as well. This feeling of like, if I succumb to this emotion, it is going to, for grief, sweep me away, for
Mm.
rage, burn me alive. But the reality of it is, well, sure, it might burn you alive, but what it leaves will also be alive, right? There will
Mm.
be a death and that rebirth, again, that life, death, life cycle. But it's also this knowing as we begin to feel and express our emotions that it's not going to stay. If you
Mm.
let it out, it will complete the
Pass.
cycle, right?
Yes.
It'll pass, it'll complete the stress cycle. It will come, it will go. We know that the physiologic response, the physiologic emotional response, it only lasts for 90 seconds. It cannot physically last more. It can come back in those waves, much like those labor contractions come back, but it's not going to be permanent. You're not going to get stuck in a fiery hell if you start to express your emotion. If it's been stuffed down for a while, there might be a few more, burnings that need to happen to get through all of that gunk, but it won't be a forever state. It can't be.
It can't be. So another one
Oh.
of the archetypes that we have is in the 13 Moon Mystery School that I'm a part of, we have something called the Creator, Destroyer, and Preserver. And these are like
Mhm.
the three faces of Kali. This is the, rage, sacred rage creates things. It shifts in perspective. It destroys things in its path that no longer serves us, but it also preserves what needs to be left behind. And I think about this in terms of a forest fire. Forest fires are hands down devastating. As somebody who lives in BC, this is something that we battle every single summer. And it leaves room, if we're to look at our forest fires this way, it leaves room for new growth to happen. And this is the
Mm.
preservation.
Mhm. I think this is a really beautiful metaphor because it also comes into, I'm going to tie this into the patriarchy. Forest fires and the patriarchy, here we come. Old growth forests don't get burned, like don't burn nearly as easily as monoculture or new, like planted by humans to replace the mass logging forests will burn. And so
Mhm.
we also have this imbalance with the natural cycle of things that we're trying to suppress forest fires also where they should have flared up and had little burns over the course of many years. It's a natural part of the cycle. It generally burns away the dead underbrush, the dead trees, but it leaves the healthy trees intact for the most part because they don't get huge. And what we've done by trying to squash these fires that should flare up because they might harm human homes is create this tinderbox, not to mention the pine beetle and all of these other pieces, but this exploitative take linear progress is only growth and more. That is what the patriarchy is built on, has created these spaces where when the fire, the rage does come, it's coming big.
Yeah, it's fierce.
Yeah. Yeah. And so being able to express your rage as it comes up is like allowing the small fire to burn when nature is ready for it to burn, which only clears out room for new growth in that one little area, and the rest of the forest stays intact.
Right. What a metaphor. What a metaphor for life.
Mm-hmm.
So
FTP.
FTP is right. Huh. So the creator destroyer, the CDP archetype, creator destroyer preserver, part of what they embody is this: I focus and I create. Their mantra is I focus, I create. And so it's exactly this. We focus on just a small area, new creation is there. We focus on a greater area, a bigger impact, happens. And the CDP archetype is really all about change. It's all about the chaos of creativity. I think about in pottery class currently, and as you also know, as wheel throwing, you have this like you literally mold this ball of clay or this flat of clay that it originally comes into a ball to then into whatever vessel it is that you're creating. And there's so much destruction and creation that happens. And our teacher this last week was showing us a large, wide bowl as our demonstration. And then partway through, went to go cut the bowl off. And as students, we are so attached to our work. We're so attached to the vessel that we've created,
Oh yeah.
And he goes to cut the bowl off the wheel, and instead he cuts halfway and then all the way up the bowl, and everybody gasps.
He does it on purpose.
Yes,
Yeah.
because he wants to show, okay, this is where there's too much clay. This is where, what's going on with this bowl. We're too thin up here. We're too thick down here. What we can do with this is how we can change or create, through trimming after the bowl has been dried. And but us, we're just, students just gasping, oh my gosh, that was gorgeous. Why would you destroy that? It's something that can be recreated. And I think this is such a good example of the CDP archetype, because it shows us that even when destruction happens, something new can be created from that. We've learned our lesson. So it's catalyzing, and there's a sense of completion with all of this.
It is that completing of we can call it a stress cycle or a rage cycle or a grief cycle, all of these strong emotions. Even joy is a stressor in some ways. Like it's a heightened state of feeling that needs to be completed. And so to complete the cycle, to discharge that rage, you need to be able to express it. And there's all sorts of different ways that we can express it. A lot of them are really embodied practices, because it is such a felt emotion that it often helps to do something embodied. So any kind of somatic practices, somatic coaching, somatic release, even just running to get some of that anger out. A lot of people who are runners will be like, I ran for however many miles and I feel much better. But crying and yelling and physical, like punch a pillow, go into the woods and get a stick and smash it and holler. And we can go in the more calm direction too. You can try to meditate. It's tough to meditate in a rageful state. You may need to discharge some anger before you sit down and try to be still. But artwork, throwing clay, put that rage into what's going on the wheel. Writing is another one. And I don't know how many of you have written a really fucking angry email or letter to get it all out, and then hopefully not hit send.
Yeah.
Because
That's why you write that in notes.
Yes, right? And we write it and we save it, we send it to ourselves, we say all the things we wish we could say, and then often a lot of those things need saying, but perhaps slightly different languaging.
Yeah.
In a more constructive way if you're not actually trying to burn a bridge.
Yeah. And I think this is the subtle difference between like anger. And I was thinking to myself as we were speaking about, this really epidemic of little boys having anger problems, how we hear of children having anger problems. And often when we look at big picture, when we draw a way out, the anger problems are often things like not being able to complete the stress cycle, or being pent up in their energy. I saw a great reel the other day. Somebody was speaking over this video of a little boy in his backyard going through an obstacle course. And I think back to certain types of yoga. Ashtanga yoga was created to expel energy from young boys. It was literally, Tommy Joyce was like, I have a solution. Let's do Kriyas over and over again. Let's do sun salutations over and over again because we're trying to expel that energy. And there hasn't been an association necessarily of anger and expelling it or expressing it in some capacity. There hasn't been this link between it. It's a moment in time where we get to make those links for ourselves and get to redefine what is acceptable in quotations and what
Mm.
is not.
I think you're drawing some attention here to an important distinction to make between a healthy expression of anger and an unhealthy one. And I think for many women, we have an unhealthy inexpression
Mm-hmm.
of anger. We don't express it, which is unhealthy. And for a lot of men and boys, they have an unhealthy expression of anger because they're not allowed to express those more tender emotions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it comes out as this explosive anger or frustration that we so often see depicted and in our own relationships again. And so I think this ability to hold and just allow all the full range of emotions is what will allow us to express all of our emotions in a healthy manner, which is to say, express them, all of them,
All of them.
um, all of them. Because if you're only expressing one or a couple, it's not a healthy manner. No matter how healthily you think you're expressing those ones, it's not healthy unless we are able to express all of them.
Mm-hmm. I love this. I
Mhm.
love this discussion. I could talk about rage all day.
Right? So good.
Is there
Speaking
anything
of,
else?
no, I was going to say, speaking of sacred rage, is one of the ceremonies inside Wild Woman, is that going to be a focus?
It's going to have a focus of rage, yes. We're going to really focus on a couple of things. So part of Wild Woman is like, how do we rewild ourselves? How do we go from being a good girl to being who we safe to express who we actually are? And
Mhm.
whether it is coming out of the figurative broom closet or not, it's just or just literally embodying who you are. It is a matter of being able to express parts of ourselves that we have suppressed because we don't know how to express them, or we
Mhm.
don't know if it's okay to express them. So, what we work with in ceremony is frequency, and the frequency of things. I mean, this may turn into a rage fest. I hope it does. But part of the frequency of this creator, destroyer, preserver is understanding how we can express ourselves in an aligned manner that we can close the loop on that stress cycle. And
Mhm.
so we're using ceremony as our modality, and this is a great opportunity for you to come in if this intrigues you, to come in and really understand for yourself that we can make such quantum leaps. If this is something that we've been working on either consciously or unconsciously for a lot of our lives, we can really make quantum leaps in things like healings and ceremony and being in circle together. So
Mhm.
that's the core of Wild Woman is creating an opportunity for you to come into the frequency of a lot of what we've been taught over the years of our life to suppress or to not be able to safely express, and then to learn how to integrate that part of yourself so that you can express it, or you can wear that hat, and you can wear that robe in the broom closet just
Mhm.
as you're deserving just as much as anybody else is.
Mhm. I love it. It
Mhm.
is such a powerful space for that kind of change and that kind of trying on those new ways of moving in the world. It
Mm,
catalyzes change, creating those shifts so much faster than we can get to just on our own in our own practice.
yes, indeed.
Hmm.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we heal in community. We really do a
Hmm.
lot of our healing in community. And part of what, patriarchal brainwashing has convinced us of is the shame that there's something inherently wrong with us, the shame that, no one else is experiencing what I'm experiencing. And that keeps us separated, and healing really, like big healing can really happen in a group setting. So this is why
Mhm.
we're doing it in
I love
community.
it. Yeah, yeah, and all the links to jump in, jump onto that wait list there, jump into this program with Ellie will be below in the show notes as always. And yeah, if you are looking for multiple avenues of engaging with this too, if you're like, okay, I want to do some more like a learning style, I suppose, would be a way to distinguish. I mean, obviously there's lots of distinctions between what Ellie and I are offering right now, but I am running my Unleash Your Inner Witch course in March. It's 6 weeks. It's kind of like a primer. I'm going to call it, that's what I'm going to call it. It's like a witchcraft primer. And we go into crafting ritual, meeting spirit guides, pulling tarot and crystals and oracle, and doing some of that together. And I'm also going to have a WhatsApp group for that community aspect. Again, this time it's not always possible for people to attend those calls live because I run them during like the regular work week working hours, and I know that's not possible for everybody with their jobs. And so I really wanted to figure out how to bring more of a sense of community and connection in so we can learn from each other and our, not feel so alone as we share our
Mm.
stories of coming back to the woo. I had a past participant this week tell me that it felt like coming home. It was just
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, you couldn't have said something more beautiful and perfect to me. And yeah, I'm excited to offer that again. There'll be a link below to sign up for that or to hop on a call with me too if you want to chat about whether this is a fit for you.
And I think what the difference here in the work that we're doing right now is that you've really honed in on the practical application. How do we do this in
Hmm.
our everyday lives? How do we take
Hmm.
what we've done through ceremony and apply it to, each and every day that we're living, if we're living in this lifestyle. So I love that that's such a compliment to the work that we do together.
Yeah, it's a perfect hand in hand, some accountability to the learnings.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hmm.
Otherwise, come join us on our Patreon. This week we have Witch's Corner, as we mentioned above. We also have the book club that will be happening this month, as we mentioned, with Women Who Run with the Wolves. And next month, excuse me, we're reading. What's
Of
the book called?
Mates and Magic.
Oh,
I
yes.
just started reading it this morning and I'm hooked.
Good,
It's so
good.
good. It's so good. Written by a fellow witchy woman who is in the My Aligned Purpose community that Ellie and I have mentioned several times. Her name is Jana, but her pen name is Maggie Francis. So we're gonna drop a link below too to her Instagram so you can go check her out and come read this witchy romance novel with us.
Yes, please.
Everybody who is in the Patreon will be getting a copy of the ebook as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mhm. Mhm.
This has been so great to talk. We will see you next week in our next episode, Woo Crew. Thanks for joining us here.
Thanks so much. And as always, go ahead. If you like this episode, share it with your friends, please. This is how we get the word out that we're here. And if you like what we're doing, we'd love for you to share and leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Thanks so much, Woo Crew. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.